Since 2016, descendants of enslaved Africans have been eligible to apply. In fact, more than 1,000 people did. People like music legend Stevie Wonder was one of them. Aisha Speed has also been approved for a Ghanaian passport. But applicants say the process was stressful, expensive, and nearly impossible to navigate. Some applicants found the 1-week deadline for DNA and other documents impossible, with cost also a major concern. And that's according to Dr. Erieka Bennett of the Africa Diaspora Forum. So, why is the government pressing the pause button now?
As a part of a joint institutional effort to further streamline and also enhance the overall experience, ensuring that the process becomes even more accessible, efficient, and also very user-friendly for our brothers and sisters in the diaspora.
If you're in the process of applying, what would this mean for you?
From a procedural perspective, this is a halt, not a rejection, not a denial. So what this means is that it is a delay. And I think that for a lot of people, it creates a lot of uncertainty, especially since it does not indicate a proper timeline.
Are you in the process of applying? Tell us your story in the comment.
All right, welcome to This Week in Ghana, your bi-weekly live stream where we talk about the news of the day in Ghana. I'll turn it over to our co-host for an introduction before I introduce myself. I think you're muted, Ivy.
Hello, my name is Ivy Prosper, sharing stories from Africa and the African diaspora. I am a producer, the founder of my company, Prosper Creative Group. I'm also a YouTube creator. I'm a speaker, published author of the book, Your Essential Guide on Moving to Ghana. And I'm excited for us to dive into this week's conversation.
Absolutely. And I'm Joe Hatagwa, founder of Authentic African Media Group. Our goal is to help people do one of three things: visit, move, and invest in the continent of Africa. And on our social media platforms, we spend a significant amount of time helping people understand how our joint roles in helping people do that and bringing the continent forward. I also have an e-commerce store where I sell merch and products made on the continent of Africa. So as you saw, we are going to spend a little bit of time today talking about the pausing of the citizenship program in Ghana. Of course, it's been talked about at length. When the announcement first came out, Ivy did a video after that tumultuous weekend, last weekend. I did a video, but Ivy and I haven't had the opportunity to talk to you guys together. And also there may be some additional updates and thoughts that we can give based on the conversations and questions that people have been asking. And then there's a couple other conversations that we want to talk about: Borderless Africa and PLO Lumumba's statements at the event that happened last week, and citizenship being given out to Hamamat and was it Wiata, and then the renaming of Kotaka International Airport.
You said citizenship being given to Hamamat and Yala, but theirs is an ambassador, a tourism ambassador.
There it is. Thank you. As you guys can see, I have not had much sleep today, so forgive me for any missteps. So with that, let's just get right back into the first story that we kicked off the live stream with. So as you guys are all aware, the citizenship program for diasporans had been announced, and then within 4 days subsequently paused. And so there were a lot of questions on the live stream I did that Monday about a couple of elements in the requirement. So just to remind everybody, the points of contention I saw mostly was around the 25,000 Ghana cedi fee, the requirement of Ghanaian DNA, and then some people had questions as to what does like ties mean, like significant ties to the country, right? And so we thought that we would maybe maybe address some of those questions that had come up, just based on the understanding that we have, having spoken to some folks, and then two, maybe give some additional thoughts if there are any. So as on that topic, Ivy, I know you and I had spoken offline about some of the questions that people had to me. I think the number one question that came to me was, what does ties to Ghana mean, right? And I know that you had seen some folks who had some thoughts. I've done some research online. It's very vague, but do you have any thoughts on that ties to Africa? I mean, sorry, ties to Ghana requirement, and maybe how it's worked previously?
So strong ties to Ghana can really mean that you've actually shown a serious commitment to the country. And that could mean that you have started a business, you've employed local people, you've made some major investments in Ghana, things that are long-term that shows that you have created a strong tie to the country. It's not that you just want citizenship just for the sake of having it, but you've truly shown a level of commitment to the country. So I believe that is part of what they mean by strong ties. And my understanding is also that the DNA request that was put into the initial information that came out 2 weeks ago, I believe that what I'm hearing is that part is going to be removed as a requirement. So the strong ties to Ghana would really be about having a strong sense of connection to the country with business. It may even be through a spouse, but generally my understanding is that it would be through proving that you have a strong tie to the country. And this would definitely be something that I think could be on a case-by-case basis, because they do interviews and they'll analyze your situation and see what your strong ties are to the country.
Yeah, and I'll just say, even for myself, right, I wasn't clear if I qualified. I mean, I thought I would likely qualify just because, I paid rent, I've lived, I've worked in country. I've now been a resident for, this is my, 5th year. I've been a resident in Ghana. So, the presumption is that I would qualify. People who have gotten it in the past, I know one person who had, by the time she got her citizenship, she had helped 70 people buy land in Ghana. Another person had over 200 or 300 people visit Ghana through their travel company. And so those are just some specific examples. I don't know if you have to have those numbers, but they kind of flew right through, right? And these were even in off years. Both of those were not part of the larger contingents. Well, one was part of like a secondary contingent. The other one was in an off year, not one of these big groups. And so, but I've also met other people who do have businesses who didn't qualify. And so some speculation is because they already had African citizenship. But it's hard to tell because they don't tell you why you don't get it. They just tell you don't, right? Which is like any country, right? Visa or yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to note that this pause in this citizenship program is a pause in the program that was fast tracking people. Right. I think people need to understand that clearly, because this was a situation where people were going to go through the whole application process, and then within a few weeks they were going to get citizenship. It was supposed to be done next month. In March was going to be a big ceremony with several people, just like the big ceremony that happened in 2024 and 2022, 2019, like previous large groups having citizenship. That's a pause on that particular program. But people who've gone through the normal way of getting citizenship, that is not paused. Right. You can still apply for citizenship if you apply the regular way and you go through the process of time living in the country, time, not like this one, which would have fast tracked you. So I had spoken to somebody who told me that, you know, she had gone through that regular process in the past. She did not go through the process that we've seen people fast tracked and get these citizenship under the previous government programs. And this person had explained to me that it took years to get citizenship, and that particular ceremony, there were other people. It wasn't just diaspora, but there were lots of other people who got citizenship that way because it was the normal way, and it takes longer. So if somebody wants to apply that way because maybe they don't have the 25,000 cedis and you want to go the other way. I didn't ask what the cost was, what the person paid, but I imagine it's probably less than the 25,000 cedis. But they went through a longer process. It's like 5 to 8 years to do it that way versus this one, which was a fast track process. So it's important for people to know that if you are not going to go through the fast track, you can always go through the long route.
Yeah, good point. And you know, the process for that, I think Ivy has mentioned it on numerous occasions. I think you can probably find that on her channel too, what the citizenship options are for the normal route. I did want to ask you though about the history of citizenship, right? You and I had spoken about this the last time we talked about it, and we talked about how it had been done on an individual basis for specific individuals. You had some really good insight into the history of different presidents who had done this, going all the way back to Kwame Nkrumah. And then the other thing that I think was interesting is that it seemed like Mahama was the person who instituted the larger group of citizenship ceremonies, and you were in Ghana for that as well. So do you want to give a little bit of insight to folks on how citizenship had been granted this fast track previously, and like who are some of the people who had been granted citizenship?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about the large groups fast tracking, that's presidential executive order. The president decides that he's going to do it, and then he signs off on it, and that's why it gets that fast track. But in our previous conversation, we talked about that Kwame Nkrumah gave citizenship to W.E.B. Du Bois when he came to Ghana, you know, and that was in the early days of Ghana's independence. So as early as then, he was giving citizenship to individuals. So there are people who have gone under the radar and gotten citizenship, not in big groups, not in big press, but they get it and it's quietly done. I actually met a woman, an African-American woman, at the Entrepreneur Festival that happened last year, who said she got it. And she's a person who works in the US. She's an African-American. She works in the US government. And she had said that she got the citizenship, but it wasn't a big ceremony. It was a one-on-one where the president granted her citizenship. So, so those kinds of things happen depending on, you know, who you are as far as what you're contributing to the country. Because she did talk about, you know, hundreds of thousands of investments and stuff like that. So those types of things are taken into consideration as well. And every country does that. Honestly, every country has it. So, you know, for example, in the US right now, there's so much talk about the current president doing a gold card. But the fact is that country has always had where people can pay for citizenship. Because I remember back in 2014, a US immigration lawyer told me that if you had $1 million, you can get a green card, you know? So a lot of countries have these programs. That's how some of these multi-million-dollar businesses end up, you know, people move to the country, open up offices, headquarters, because they're able to pay what's required in order for them to get their residency or get citizenship, and then in turn start their business, which is investing in the country, giving jobs and all that kind of stuff. Countries look at those kinds of things all the time, you know? So if somebody came into the country who's a multimillionaire diaspora person, I'm sure that they could be fast-tracked for the fact that they have potential to invest in the country, prove that they're going to invest, prove that they're going to open up, you know, something, or maybe they've already started. It's something that a lot of countries already do. So, but this particular time when they're pausing this fast track, We don't know when it's gonna when they're gonna start the process again. But I know it's definitely not something they've completely halted. It's just a temporary pause while they figure out what they're going to do with respect to some of the demands that the diaspora had, because really they put the announcement out and then the diaspora communities came together and had their emergency town hall meeting. And that emergency meeting is what ended up resulting in the response of the government to put a pause, you know, while they have an engagement with the diaspora communities that have more discussions about the way forward and how to do this to best serve the people.
Absolutely. And I heard two phrases from KOD in that video. I heard more accessible, which to me means cost effective, right? Generally, to make things more accessible, when you're saying something publicly without saying cheaper, you usually mean a lower cost and easier, right? Which I would imagine may also include the example you gave earlier on no longer requiring Ghanaian DNA, right? DNA of Ghanaian descent. All right, cool. So because you and I hadn't spoken about that, I did want to make sure we covered off on some of that and answered some of those questions for folk. Somebody mentioned citizenship by investment. Many countries do have citizenship by investment, including the United States, as Ivy mentioned. Previously, it was not necessarily a policy, but it's now a policy of this current administration. It's been a policy of Tony Blair in the UK previously, as I mentioned. That's why a lot of former African presidents in the 90s got citizenship in the UK, and all their families did as well. Because Tony Blair had citizenship by investment. So it is not something that is specific to the continent of Africa or emerging markets. Many Western countries do citizenship by investment, and many times it fluctuates between administrations whether or not they continue to do it. But there's almost always a way. There's almost always a way if you have the funds to get citizenship in a country. Okay, so with that being said, moving on to what I think is an important topic, the renaming of the airport in Accra, Ghana. I just, and I'm embarrassed by this, but I just recently became aware of who Kotoka was, and the reason for the naming of the airport. I was not aware of this, and this was actually happened after going to the Kwame Nkrumah Museum to shoot some content. I just happened to ask the Uber driver, and then of course I did some research afterwards and learned. But we're going to hear from PLO Lumumba, who'll be featured twice today, on his thoughts on the renaming, because the renaming of the airport right now, as it stands, from what we understand, is being renamed to Accra International Airport, right? From Kotoka International Airport. So we're going to hear from PLO Lumumba. He used to work on the anti-corruption in Kenya. He's a very outspoken Pan-Africanist and a professor. You guys probably have seen and heard from him before. So we're going to hear from him on his thoughts of the renaming of the airport in Ghana, or Accra, Ghana.
In Ghana right now about Kotoka International Airport. The name Kotoka, as a historian, you know who Kotoka is, and having the name Kotoka on our airport, what do you make of it as a great son of the land?
You know, history is history, and I know that the choice has been made to rename it Accra International Airport. There are some of us who think it should bear another name.
Which is?
And that name is Kwame Nkrumah.
I give you a hug for that. I give you a hug. In Ghana.
All right, give him a hug for that. So the thoughts on the renaming, and any history or insight you want to give to folks on Kotoka, and yeah, we'd love to hear from you, Ivy, on this one.
I am glad, because I have wanted the airport to be renamed. I agree with him that I feel it should be Kwame Nkrumah International Airport. It was originally called the Accra International Airport. It was in 1969 when it got renamed to the Kotoka International Airport. And the reason that they named it that was they named it after Lieutenant I think it's Emmanuel Kotoka. He was killed at where is now the front of the airport area. So they named it after him, which to me makes no sense. But he was a part of the people who overthrew Kwame Nkrumah. So he was part of the coup that overthrew the first president of this country. So I don't understand why they would want to have an airport named after a man who overthrew the country's first president. And, you know, a first president who, you know, people highly regard. I know at the time there was a lot of propaganda, which made people start to see him negatively. But now, as decades have passed, people look back and they're like, wow, he really was a great president and did the things that were necessary for this nation. So it just doesn't make sense to me to maintain that name of Kotoka on the airport. I think that renaming it is a good thing, in my personal opinion. I agree with Lumumba. As I said, it should be Kwame Nkrumah International Airport, but I'll be happy even if it's changed to Accra International Airport. I think maybe Accra International Airport might be an easier change because that was the name before. That was the original name. Maybe it's easy to revert back to that name when it comes to, I don't know, behind the scenes airport renamings and stuff. I don't know, but I imagine it would probably take the same amount of work to change documents, to change all information at airports globally, to change it to Accra as Kwame Nkrumah. So why not just change it to Kwame Nkrumah Airport, Kwame Nkrumah International Airport?
Yeah, 100%. You know, and I agree with you that it should be Kwame Nkrumah International Airport. You know, when people talk about the best African leaders in all of history, but at least since and post-colonial leaders, Kwame Nkrumah is at the top of that list, right? You know, there can be arguments about where he is first, second, or third, however you want to look at it. But in general, I think everyone agrees around the continent. I mean, he's the first person to ever be featured on 2 currencies from 2 different countries. And I think the only person, well, let me take that back. The only African, because the Queen has been featured on many currencies and French people have been featured on different currencies as well. But the only African to be featured on multiple currencies, and the only leader in Africa to ever be president of more than one country in Africa, right? He was co-president of Guinea, and after the coup in Ghana, he ended up being the co-president of Guinea. That's how highly regarded he was, that he was asked to be a co-president of Guinea as it was becoming an independent nation. It's very rare to see. Well, it's never been done. So I think it's hugely important that name be memorialized, especially because the person who overthrew him was the one that had been memorializing for so long, which made absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you 100%. Accra International Airport, yeah, I know that had been its name previously, and yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, because if you had it named, and I guess it could be controversial to some, but I think when you talk to most people, I don't know what the percentage is, but he has a very high approval rating around the continent and around the country. When you talk to most people, I think most people reflect on his time, you know, in high regard. Okay, so now on to the next story. I think this is one that's an interesting one, because I think it speaks to how different countries on the continent, how little they know about each other. And, you know, this is going to speak to a conversation we're going to have on a Borderless Africa as well. There's so many different reasons why this story is important. But you guys have been familiar with, you know, different countries on the continent having these online wars, right? When they talk about each other.
Yeah.
And we had Muhammad on having a meeting with Zambia. So let me just give you some notes. So President John Mahama expressed surprise at that his traditional Ghanaian attire only attracted wide attention after he visited Zambia. What am I talking about? Zambia, despite having worn it on global platforms such as the United Nations. He spoke to in an interview to Joy News. And so if you guys are not familiar, when he had that meeting, there were people on social media saying that he was wearing a woman's blouse, right? There was a lot of conversation about that. And that just speaks to how little folks are aware of different cultures from around the continent. So just for context, let me show you guys quickly what he was wearing. So this is the outfit here. You guys could, if you could see it on screen, I don't know if it's showing up. Nope, it's not. Let me do this. So now you can see it on screen. So this was the outfit here. Sorry, this page has too many ads. There we go. So now you can see, so this was the outfit that was worn, right? This is the Fugu. And it led to some online controversy. Really, and we'll get to Mahama's response, but I just wanted to give you guys some context first as to what the what the controversy was, and then I'll play a little bit from this interview with Joy News on his response to this, and then we'll have some more commentary on the other side. Let me just make sure you guys can see this. Okay, what are you seeing? Okay, let me share this tab instead.
Triggered a new wave. It's a Fugu revolution in Ghana right now. A lot of Ghanaians have posted pictures of themselves in smoke. Today at the Independence Square, renowned photographer Yaupare is organizing a free photo shoot for all the people who in smoke who come to the Independence Square. One of my colleagues at Joy News Hits FM, they launched a Wear Fugu Friday just yesterday and is receiving a lot of reviews. I want to find out from you. You have always been a supporter of Made in Ghana. In fact, it was actually part of your campaign message, and you've made a conscious effort to always wear locally made clothes. What do you make of the new smoke wave that you've inspired?
Okay, it's called the smock in English, but in our language, some people call it fugu, some call it batakari. Yeah. Now, this is a traditional dress that is made by a local industry. It's part of our culture, and so in the past, it was worn by kings, royalty, and also warriors. When our warriors were going to war, they wore smocks, and the belief was that the smocks were soaked in some herbs, and then some spiritual thing was done. So when you fire a bullet, it can penetrate, you know. And so the smoke portrays a lot of things in our culture. And significantly, on the day Ghana, the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence, on the day our independence was declared, our president, Kwame Nkrumah, was wearing a smock. He and all the freedom fighters were wearing smock. So smocks have become an integral part of our cultural identity.
All right, this interview is quite long, so if you want, you can, check it out. But your thoughts, Ivy, on how the internet, some folks on the internet in Zambia responded to the smock / fugu that President Mahama wore.
I mean, I think that it just goes to speak about culture and how a lot of people don't really know about each other on the continent. There's so much to learn from each other because my understanding is that there was a blog or something that made a comment calling it a blouse when they saw President Mahama wearing it, saying, what blouse is he wearing? And then Ghanaians instantly took to social media and started responding that this is not a blouse, this is fugu, this is traditional dress, traditional wear from the northern parts of Ghana. And then people started, showcasing theirs. And then always all the posts I see, it says, hey, Zambia, this is fugu. Hey, Zambia, look at this. And so it became this whole thing of them kind of just trying to show people in Zambia that this is something traditional from Ghana. And so to me, it's another example of culture and how powerful cultural dynamics can be and how people can take a sense of pride in their culture when they see somebody making a comment about it. I think that it was a reminder of taking pride in your cultural heritage where some people might not have, because he's wearing it intentionally. The president is wearing some of these clothes intentionally to project Ghanaian culture through what he wears. So I think that he did that. I mean, he's gotten a lot of attention because of this particular one. So let's see what else there is to come in other times when he continues to wear Ghanaian clothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was interesting, and I like how Ghanaians decided to turn it into something positive. You see this a lot. Generally, when people are offended by other people, they tend to go the opposite way, right? And I liked how Ghanaians decided to show off their fugus instead, and the photographer deciding to do the free photo shoot at Independence Square, so that it just gave people a sense of pride. I will say, of all the countries I've been to, Ghana seems to have the most pride in Ghana, their flag, their colors, their history. It's everywhere. I mean, you go to like those booths that you can get your mobile money from, it's painted in the Ghanaian flag colors. You go in people's houses, they have a flag up in their house. You know, you see it kind of everywhere. And so even there are buildings that are painted like that. I can't remember the name of those 3 buildings, but they're painted in the Ghanaian flag colors. And so, yeah, I think it speaks to that country pride in who you are as a people. And I like the way that they handled it positively, as opposed to then, you know, speaking negatively about Zambia. They use it as a chance to educate. And I think it was really smart. And it seemed to, I'm sure if you're a Fugu or smock maker, you are doing really well these couple of weeks, right? I mean,
yeah,
it has been huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things you had mentioned to me, Ivy, offline was how on Fridays, right, there was a push previously to have country pride. And can you remind me of what the Fridays were called again, and what people were doing previously to kind of continue country pride?
They called it Friday Wear.
Friday Wear.
Yeah, so Friday Wear. So people who live in like the US and Canada, like they do casual Fridays where people can wear jeans and, you know, be a little bit more relaxed. In Ghana, they started it as, it was called the National Friday Wear Program. And so people were encouraged to wear Ghanaian clothes to the office, to work, because it got to a point where there were people who they were seeing it as a lack of, I guess, a lack of pride, and people were wearing foreign clothes because there's a lot of imports in Ghana. I mean, today there's like 15 million used clothes imported into Ghana. I think it's every week or every month. I can't remember, but people have become now accustomed to always wearing foreign style clothes. So anyway, at that time also it was getting big. So to encourage people to dress in traditional wear, they did the Friday Wear program, that Fridays you would wear Ghanaian clothes. And so that was, I think that was under President Kufuor at that time. So yeah, that people started to get used to it. And so still today, you hear about people doing Friday Wear to the office.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. It's 15 million garments weekly on imports, right? And there are, I mean, beaches full of these clothes. There are landfills full of clothes, a lot of secondhand clothes, you know, the fast wear clothes, those clothes that aren't great for your skin, cheap clothes with dyes and all kinds of fabrics that are not great for skin, but you find them a ton there. And so to your point, when I worked at Jumia, I remember on Fridays, people wearing the Fugu. And it was interesting to me because I was asking, like, you know, why are you guys, because I was like, is it like Dress Down Friday? And they mentioned to me that this was something that they just did on a regular basis. I don't even know if they knew the history. The people I was talking to.
Some of them didn't even know. Some of them probably didn't even know.
Yeah, they didn't seem to know the history, because when you told me, it was my first time hearing it. But I knew people doing it, right? They just did it as part of what they would do on Fridays, right? Because when I would always ask these questions, you know, I'm generally inquisitive. So I'm just trying to understand culture in you know, the country that I was living in. And yeah, and most of the guys who wore it were just saying, this is what we do on Fridays. And they had done it in multiple companies, right? This wasn't their first company they had ever worked at. So every company they had worked at, this was a process that they followed on Fridays.
Yeah, yeah. And also part of it too was also to encourage patronizing local business. So like you get your fabric, you go to the tailor, you go to the seamstress, and then they make you something with the local cloth that you've chosen to get something made. Or if you're doing the fugu, kente, you know, you have people who are weaving these textiles. So it's like you are actually patronizing the local artisans when you are wearing the local clothes.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. And so I thought that was a great story, and I'm glad we were able, and yeah, and I think, and just the one piece, and I think this dovetails nicely into the next story, is, you know, I think it's not all on the folks in Namibia, them not knowing this about Ghana, because there isn't free and
Zambia.
What did I say? Namibia? I keep saying
you said Namibia.
So sorry guys, as I said, bear with me. So you know, one of the things that I think that is a challenge on the continent, we talk about this a lot, is there's no free movement across different parts of the continent. There's free movement between the East African states, there's free movement between the West African states, maybe in Central Africa and Southern Africa, Northern, but there isn't free movement across the entire continent, right? I told this story previously that when I worked at Jumia, we had a sales conference in Egypt, and 2 people were not granted visas to go. We had a person who applied for his visa in Lagos. Of course, Nigerians, many parts of the continent do not like to have Nigerians enter their country. He applied for a visa. He had to fly to Abuja from Lagos. The guy didn't show up for his meeting. He went back to Lagos, scheduled another meeting, went to that meeting, was denied. So 2 flights to Abuja to go to the Egyptian embassy in Nigeria to be denied the visa to go to Egypt. And this is not uncommon. You know, when I was traveling around the continent, unless it was West Africa, I was using my US passport. When I went to Tanzania, when I went to Egypt, I used my US passport. And in both instances, I was able to get visa on arrival with my US passport, but I would have had to apply weeks, maybe even months in advance if I wanted to use my Sierra Leone passport to travel to these countries. And so the Africa Prosperity Network had an event where they spoke about needing a borderless Africa. And there's a petition to sign, and we'll talk about that in a second. But one of their speakers, and Ivy was there, so she'll give us her insights from being there. But one of the speakers, I think on the final day, was PLO Lumumba. And this is something that he has talked about a lot. There are many viral videos of PLO Lumumba speaking about the issues with cross-border business, travel, moving, all kinds of different things. So we'll give him a moment to speak on this a little bit, and then we will have some commentary on the other side.
Interest of the continent of Africa. The question is, are the countries prepared to make countries visa-free? Are we prepared to have one currency? Are we prepared to have one identity? Are we prepared to empower our young men and our women? Are we creating an environment where we can realize our potential? Are we prepared to embrace the dividends of the 4th and 5th industrial revolution?
I'll leave it there, but he started with, are we prepared for a visa-free or visa-less travel to each country? I think it's about time. You see it in the European Union. You know, I think when I think about Europeans, they are the most traveled people amongst their countries in their continent. You know, they summer in Italy, they over winter break go to France. Like if you're from the UK, I talk to people all the time who just freely move through Europe, who've lived in the UK.
Yeah.
And Africans don't really get to do that often, not across the entire continent, and many times not even across the neighboring country. So your thoughts on this, Ivy? I'd love to hear from you on this, and I'll have some more commentary after.
I mean, it's pretty simple in my opinion. We should have it where people don't need to have visas when they're traveling from country to country across the continent of Africa. Africans shouldn't have to go through all of that stress. And also, some of these visa prices are extremely high. I have heard stories about visa applications being more expensive for an African than it would be for, an American or a European. And so the irony is that the Africans, most of them, their salaries are not very high, but yet they're being asked for visa costs of $100, $200, and even $300. That is just very unrealistic. And then the scrutiny that they go through with the questions and everything, it really should be easier to be traveling from one African country to the next when you are an African citizen or African resident. It should be really simplified for people to cross. And I think about, you brought up the European Union. I mean, they have it where they travel throughout from country to country. I mean, someone from Spain could just take a train, they go to Italy, they go to France. It's like, and they're not asking for all these visas to cross the border. We should have something like that here where you can easily travel from country to country. I mean, we're supposed to have it with ECOWAS. People are supposed to be able to just travel freely without visas, but people still have complained about having issues when they do get to the border, and some of the border agents give them problems. Like people I know who drove across to go to Togo have complained. And then when they want to drive to Benin, they've complained about the issues that they face. So it should really be easier for people in the African continent to be able to move from place to place.
Right, exactly. And, we have an African Union, they have a European Union, and in that European Union, it's a free flow of dollars, commerce, people between countries, except the UK. The UK is obviously Brexit. They got out of there. But in general, that's how it had been up until Brexit with the UK as well. And we have an African Union, but that does not work with the African Union. And to your point, I also have some anecdotal information and insight into people traveling cross-border within the economic community of West African states. I had friends travel to Gambia, and between Gambia and Senegal, they were not allowed into Senegal. They went from Senegal and they were trying to get into Gambia. They were not allowed into Gambia. I've had this issue with people trying to go to Liberia by road and Guinea by road from Sierra Leone. And this is a really big challenge for people who travel by road, even though they have passports that say you should be able to move between countries.
Yeah.
So that freedom of movement is really not there. And so I do think that could speak to why so few people are aware of what's happening in even their next door country, right? You got a country that's right next to you. You have no idea what's happening in that country because you've never been there, because they make it difficult for you to get there. So obviously we'd love to see that change. And you told me about this, so I'm glad you had mentioned this, but there's the Make Africa Borderless movement that the folks from sorry, I just lost it. Sorry, my bad.
Okay.
Here we go. Make Africa Borderless. There we go. You guys can see that, right? So there's a petition here, and there's a petition to get 10 million signatures, right? There's only 6,389 so far. So the website is called makeafricaborderlessnow.com. If you guys watching can head over there after this live stream, the link is also in the description. No matter where you're watching, it should be there, except for Instagram. So you can head over to our YouTube channels or Facebook or wherever, and you'll be able to find the link to Make Africa Borderless. So you were at this event that they had where PLO Lumumba spoke on the third day, but you were there on the first day. What were the themes of this event, or what did you get from that first day when you were there? Yeah, I'd love to hear for what your experience was like being there.
Well, I don't mean to laugh. It's just one of the things that I always am frustrated and tired about in Ghana is things always starting so late. So that was my issue, was it's starting late. They got up to like 2 hours behind. So, you know, there were some speakers towards the end that I couldn't see because I had to leave because I had to be somewhere else. But in any case, the theme this year was about empowering small and medium businesses and empowering women and youth as part of Africa's market and future, with the goal of innovating and also talking about a lot about collaboration. And then the sub theme of making Africa borderless. So I was at the first day where they had panel discussions with, you know, women business leaders talking about doing business in the African continent. And it was the opening ceremony day. So, you know, of course, there were a lot of leaders who spoke. The vice president spoke, vice president of Ghana spoke, and the head of the Africa Prosperity Dialogue also spoke. So there was a lot of speeches because it was the official opening day. And then in the morning, they had sessions where they had like business sessions with some business leaders who spoke, doing like almost like a workshop type of thing for the youth, for young people to be able to learn from some seasoned professionals about doing business. And of course, there's always talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area and how we can maximize trade between other African countries. So, I mean, overall, it is a good event. And it's been happening in Ghana every year. This year was the first time that I saw it at the Accra International Conference Center. The previous years, they've done it at like Peduase Lodge. So it's a little bit out of town. It's in town, but it's out of town. It's like a Brie. So, I mean, so that's not really Accra. That's in the eastern region. But this time it was right in Accra. So it was well attended. There was, you know, quite a few people there, and a lot of young people who actually came out as well in hopes of networking and meeting key people that can help them with learning the ropes of the things that it is that they want to do. But I mean, overall, it is a well-intentioned event. I just think that the timeliness was a bit problematic with not being on time.
Africa man time, as they say, right? Pick a country. Pick a country. Everybody says Africa man time. So yeah, I think, yeah. So yeah, timeliness, we do need to be better at that. But yeah, so, you know, of course, I think that theme of making Africa borderless and also trade between countries, I think is hugely important, because I think a big part of why many countries are still emerging and not as advanced as they could be is because they had been, instead of being business partners and having collective bargaining with each other, two larger countries, they had all done these siloed individual deals for their minerals and for their goods and services to individual countries that have bigger GDP, bigger spending power, better negotiation tactics, etc. And so you just don't have any real negotiating power to sit at the table with a country in Europe, which has, you know, much higher GDP, et cetera, right? But if you combine, like the AES has done, for example, right? You know, working together on a number of different things, it's a lot harder to take advantage of them in deals when they have collective bargaining and they're working together to make a deal happen. That's what unions are for, right? At companies, there are unions. So we were expecting that would be what the African Union would do, but we're just not there yet. So we'd like to see more of that. But so doing something like this and doing this petition, I think, you know, it's one step towards at least attempting to make a difference. I did see while we were live, 6 people signed up for the petition. I'm gonna say we should take credit for that. I don't know if that was just us. And then another person just did just now. So we need all the signatures we can get. I mean, they're trying to get to 10 million signatures.
I know.
Right? That is a hefty number.
It is. It's a huge undertaking.
Huge undertaking. And, you know, we're at a fraction of a fraction from getting there. I mean, we are very, very and low. So any of you guys who know people who are interested in this, make sure you share this with them. You know, obviously I've signed the petition. Many people, you know, I've sent this to people that I know. So we definitely encourage you guys to share this with folks. I think it's really important. We think it's important. So, but obviously do it after the live stream is over. Okay, so so moving on to the next and final topic. So in the vein of citizenship, I do want to mention that two people got ambassador roles. So they were already citizens, but they got ambassador roles. And it was Hamamat and Wiyala who were able to get these ambassador roles. You guys might remember Hamamat from the viral clips of I Show Speed going to the Shea Butter Museum and getting the massages and whatnot. It was very viral. I mean, I don't know how many people shared those videos. She also had seen some of his content, so she participated in some of some of the stuff that he normally does, like barking and all that kind of stuff. But the Ghana Tourism Authority has set its sights on a major cultural offensive, with plans to officially commission two of the nation's most influential northern icons, Hamamat and Wiyala, as global tourism ambassadors. The revelation was made on Showbiz A to Z on Saturday, February 7th, so this past Saturday, by the Deputy CEO of the Ghana Tourism Authority, Gilbert Agri, who confirmed that the Ministry of Tourism, Culture, and Creative Arts has already initiated a high-level engagement with both personalities. So your thoughts on the ambassadorial roles for these two, Ivy?
I mean, I think that Wiyala should have gotten this a long time ago. Wiyala has been projecting Ghana, Northern culture to the world for her entire musical career. She's been so celebrated in other countries, more than she is in her own country. And it goes to that whole thing of sometimes people celebrate you abroad before they celebrate you at home. But she's been a huge advocate for promoting Ghana to the world. She's actually performed at some Ghana tourism events that I've seen her perform a few times, Wiyala. So I think that she's a great option. She calls herself the Lioness of Africa. And she definitely always projects that whole African vibe. And then definitely Hamamat it's a no-brainer. She's been doing the Shea Butter Museum. I think it's been like up to 15 years, I think she's been doing it. And I've been following her for more than a decade. I've probably been following her since probably like 2012, 2013 or something through social media. And I've seen her grow her platform from like nothing to like over 1 million, I think she has on her Instagram. So she has built her community. She has her Shea Butter brand that she's been selling for a number of years. And then her museum, and she's been doing this. She's a legacy Shea Butter person, so it's been in her family. I think her grandmother and great grandmother, they all did the Shea Butter business, and now she's been doing it. So I think that she's a good choice. I just hope that the ministry and Ghana Tourism working together, having them be ambassadors, have like a strategic plan, because I know that there's been previous years that the ministry has had ambassadors for tourism, and some of those ambassadors publicly express a little bit of discontent, feeling that they weren't utilized enough in some of the promotional activities. So hopefully it will be different this time around.
Yes, hope so as well. I've seen this done in other countries, and I've seen similar sentiment. So we do hope that it does lead to, to one, achieving that goal, and two, being utilized the way they should. I mean, both of which have done a ton. I'm more familiar with Hamamat just because of the Shea Butter Museum, having been there, and the social media following, just because I follow all the people. But yeah, so I'd love to see that happen. We will keep you guys posted and see how that goes. All right, so that is everything for today. Thank you guys for staying on so long. We
I
went a
haven't
little
seen
over.
our community engaged. I haven't seen our comments today. So interesting.
Yeah, it was mostly people were just commenting on the first story.
Yeah.
And then not much else. I noticed that. But you know, those of you who stayed on this long, you guys didn't comment as much, but we want to thank you guys at least for watching. And you know, maybe you guys were listening to us while you're on your way home from work, or you know, on your lunch break, wherever you are in the world today. So we appreciate you. But we do love more engagement. We want to hear from you guys. And every once in a while, depending on what the commentary is, we can put it up on the screen and we can answer your questions if you have any. So definitely, you know, get in there, leave your comments for future live streams. We will be back in 2 weeks for our next live stream. In the meantime, check out both of our platforms. Subscribe to Ivy at Ivy Prosper. Subscribe to Authentic African at Authentic African on YouTube, Authentic_African on Instagram. But if you search Authentic African on any platform, you should be able to see it. Same thing with Ivy. That's if you want to support the freeway. You can also support in other ways. Links are in Ivy's description and her profile on Instagram, etc. And same for me. So if you want to support in any other way, please do that. And you can also do that on this platform. You can, you know, on YouTube specifically, I should say, there are ways that you can support through you know, what are those called? Those super
chats, super thanks. You tap the $sign in the bottom corner of the live chat to show your support. I think you can also do that even outside of the live chat. There's ways to show your support through the super thanks or super chat. But a lot of times creators have other links like PayPal, like Zelle, like Cash App, because they want to be able to receive the support directly. Because one of the things that people don't know is when the super thanks and super chat goes through YouTube, YouTube takes 30%. So if you gave $10 to your favorite creator for some information, that creator takes home $7 and $3 goes to YouTube directly. So so that's something to think about. Sometimes creators have their PayPal links, as I said, Zelle, Cash App, because they want to be able to get all of that in support of what they do. And I just also want to mention that I know that the comments were a little bit less as, you know, other topics came. I think one of the key things is that a lot of times people say they want to be citizens of a country. It's also important that if you want to be a citizen of a country, also be aware of the things that are going on in that country, paying attention to the news that are happening in that country, because if you're planning on being a citizen, it means that you're a person who can vote in that country eventually. Even if you want to be a resident, it's good to know what's going on because it gives you an understanding of the lay of the land and how people think. If you're doing a business, it gives you an idea of what people value, what's important to them, what's going on, what can help you with the business you're doing. So knowing the news that's happening in the country that you want to live in or do business in is very helpful.
Absolutely, 100%. And you know, if you have the ability to do your civic duty, then it's your duty to do your research on candidates and the parties and what people do, their past history, etc. So, yes, very, very important points. Yeah. So we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thanks again for watching. See you guys soon. Bye, guys.